So, raise your hand if you had any appointments today or this week. Dentist, doctor, what y'all do? Work, doctor, eye doctor, chiropractor, therapist, hair appointment. Did you? He missed his appointment. Uh-oh. All right. Well, you actually showed up for your Bible study appointment today because it's at an appointed time at 7 o'clock. So most of what we do in today's world is governed by appointments. My life is significantly governed by appointments because I am a hairstylist by trade. So my daily work revolves around appointments. So depending on the service, I can have someone, an appointment that lasts 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 2 hours or more. This year marks the 29th year in my career. So I started when I was 5. But 5 plus. Being that I am this many years in, I am what you call old school. Not old, just old school. So I still use a paper calendar book for my appointments. I like that because I have learned through all those years that it's much easier to take a little pencil and erase instead of getting on a computer program or an app or something like that. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but I work part-time now. There's still a lot of people on here. It still really feels like full-time because not only am I a hairstylist, I'm the owner of the salon. So there's a lot of things that go into that. A lot of domestic engineering, stuff like that. A lot of administrative. And every time I go to the salon to clean and I'm cleaning the toilets, I question, why did I ever want to own my own salon? And you'd also think that after 29 years, I would have seen and heard it all. Well, just yesterday, I had something happen and figured I'd share it because it was kind of funny. I had a client over the weekend. Actually, it was a client's daughter. She called me and said, can you fit my mom in? She's an elderly lady. She said she's going to have her picture taken. And I said, okay, well, I'll see if I can find a spot. So I found her a spot yesterday. She came in at 10:30, and she walked in, and I said, well, what are you getting your picture taken for? You having some family pictures? She said, no, it's for my obituary. I was like, okay, well, so this picture, no pressure on me, but this picture is going to be painted on a canvas and taken to the funeral home, and then somebody's going to keep it forever, but no pressure. So within that 10-minute slot that I found to fix her hair. So anyway, you never know what's going to be said in a small town hair salon. Becky and I, we work together. Becky's also a hairstylist. We both have a lot of stories, and one day I'm going to write a book, but names will definitely have to be changed. It's a small town. But because of the nature of my work, I have to plan and be organized. And this follows me into my home life as well. I have a calendar on my phone. I don't know if everybody uses the calendar on their phone, but I use that. But I also have a paper calendar that I put on the fridge. My husband still declares he never knows what we're doing, but it's right there. Does anybody else use a paper calendar, or do you just use your phone? So most people use both? Okay. I like to have both because it keeps me on track. So, yes, and two. It doesn't ding. I know. I wish it did because I would stay old school. I'm definitely old school. We should all have at least one appointment every day, every single day. And that primary appointment every day is to meet God in the Word and through prayer. So that should be the number one priority in our calendar. Have you ever thought about God having a calendar? Kind of a different thought, huh? I'm guessing that his looks a lot different from ours because God is the orchestrator of time. Ecclesiastes 3:1 says, for everything there is a season and a time for every matter or purpose under heaven. Though it's not like ours, God does have a calendar, and he writes divine appointments in his calendar. So divine appointments is the topic that I'm going to be speaking on tonight. And just a side note before we really get into the lesson, I also use my phone's notepad. And if I see something or hear something in a sermon or see something online, I'll just go make a little note of it. Well, a few months ago, I had seen something online and I wanted to remember it, but I really didn't take great notes. All I wrote was divine appointments. So then later when Brian asked me about speaking, I thought, okay, well, let me go to my notepad here. We'll see if there's anything. Saw those two words and I said, okay, that's it. So I kind of got confirmation when Tiffany and Danny taught a few weeks ago, and they both, divine appointments came up. So I said, okay, Lord, that's what you want me to speak on. So that's what we're going to learn about today. The term divine appointment is not mentioned in the Bible, but the concept is in there multiple times. Divine appointments refer to divinely orchestrated encounters, events, or circumstances that God uses to fulfill his purposes. And if you didn't catch that, that is question number 1. Divine appointments refer to divinely orchestrated encounters, events, or circumstances that God uses to fulfill his purposes. Forgot I had my glasses here. Okay, that's better. We're going to break it down a little. 34. Let's break it down a little smaller. So the word divine means relating to or coming from God. It can also refer to something extremely good or lovely, excellent, and delightful. Appointment. It's an arrangement to meet someone at a particular time and place. Another way of defining is an act of appointing, assigning a job, or a position to someone. Divine appointments are not random. They are part of God's sovereign plan, and they often involve significant life-altering moments and assignment opportunities for spiritual growth or ministry. So there's a lot of examples in the Bible of divine appointments. When Jesus encountered the Samaritan woman at the well, when Ruth arrived in Boaz's field, a lot of other ones. But because of our recent study of Genesis, I chose the story of Joseph, the son of Jacob, and his divine appointment to focus on for today. So I think we all know the story of Joseph, but we're going to refresh our memory real quick. So if you have your phone or your Bibles, you can turn to Genesis chapter 37. And we're going to start with verse 2 and read through verse 11. And I will be reading from NLT today. Genesis 37, verse 2. This is the account of Jacob and his family. When Joseph was 17 years old, he often tended his father's flocks. He worked for his half-brothers, the sons of his father's wives, Bilhah and Zilpah. But Joseph reported to his father some of the bad things his brothers were doing. Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other children because Joseph had been born to him in his old age. So one day Jacob had a special gift made for Joseph, a beautiful robe. But his brothers hated Joseph because their father loved him more than the rest of them. They couldn't say a kind word to him. One night Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers about it, they hated him more than ever. Listen to this dream, he said. We were out in the field tying up bundles of grain. Suddenly my bundle stood up, and your bundles all gathered around and bowed low before mine. His brothers responded, So you think you will be our king, do you? Do you actually think you will reign over us? And they hated him all the more because of his dreams and the way he talked about them. Soon Joseph had another dream, and again he told his brothers about it. Listen, I have had another dream, he said. The sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed low before me. This time he told the dream to his father, as well as to his brothers, but his father scolded him. What kind of dream is that? He asked. Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow to the ground before you? But while his brothers were jealous of Joseph, his father wondered what the dreams meant. Now this story, I think Fiona loves the story of Joseph too, because we've talked about it before, but Joseph has always been one of my favorite stories, and I think it's because it's relatable, although, we weren't sold into slavery or anything, or right, any of that, or most of us haven't been elevated to the kind of power that he was given, unless there's something you need to tell me. But it's relatable because his path to get there included a lot of hardships, false accusations, and betrayal. And I will guess that most of us have experienced at least one of those in some capacity. And if you haven't, you're extremely blessed or an extreme liar. But because the reality is we live in the world. We're not of it, but we're in it. And we have to face difficult times. So Joseph's story to me is a reminder that God uses the good and the bad to fulfill his larger plan. Romans 8:28 says, "And we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose for him." Again, I'm reading from NLT, but most versions say all things work together. So all things means the good, the bad, and the ugly. God uses all things to work his purpose in our lives and in the lives of others. So when Jacob gave Joseph a special robe, it created jealousy from his brothers who already didn't like him. And on another side note, when I was studying for this, and you all might already know this, but there are some scholars that have translated the term coat of many colors that some of us will say, translated the term from Hebrew to just mean long sleeve, or a garment of fine quality and embellishments, rather than a multicolored coat. Not that it matters, but I just thought that was interesting that a lot of us say that, but it may not exactly mean what we thought it did. But regardless, it was enough to make his brothers jealous. Joseph was a dreamer, just like his father Jacob. That may or may not be another question. Joseph was a dreamer, just like his father Jacob. But his mistake was telling his brothers about his dream. And I know it sounds harsh, but I cannot figure out if Joseph was just not very smart or just naive and innocent, or possibly he just enjoyed being the favorite and told his brothers about the dream to make them jealous. But I've always thought, no, why would you do that? We know from the rest of the passage that Joseph's brothers betrayed him and sold him into slavery. He ended up being sold to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. That was a divine appointment. He was later falsely accused and imprisoned. Now, from a human perspective, those things were unfair, and they were painful detours. But each of those setbacks positioned him for that greater assignment. So what seemed like delays, detours, were actually steps that God used to place Joseph exactly where he needed to be. All right, so now we're going to go to Genesis chapter 39, and again with verse 2. The Lord was with Joseph, so he succeeded in everything he did as he served in the home of his Egyptian master. Potiphar noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph, giving him success in everything he did. This pleased Potiphar, so he soon made Joseph his personal attendant. He put him in charge of his entire household and everything he owned. From the day Joseph was put in charge of his master's household and property, the Lord began to bless Potiphar's household for Joseph's sake. All his household affairs ran smoothly, and his crops and livestock flourished. So the first part of that passage said the Lord was with Joseph and succeeded in everything he did in the home of his Egyptian master. And all was running perfectly until Potiphar's wife got involved. When Joseph didn't give in to her advances, she lied, and Joseph ended up in prison. So verse 21 tells us again that the Lord was with Joseph and caused everything he did to succeed, but this time, where was he? In prison. So Joseph ended up interpreting the chief cupbearer and chief baker's dreams in prison and asked to be remembered for that good deed. But according to chapter 40, verse 23, the cupbearer forgot all about him, never giving him another thought. And of course, the chief baker didn't remember him either because he was dead. So it took another 2 years before Pharaoh had a dream that needed to be interpreted. And finally, Joseph was remembered. Most of us know this story, so we know that after he interpreted Pharaoh's dreams, Joseph ended up being put in charge of the entire land of Egypt, and no one had a higher rank other than Pharaoh. So that connection of meeting and interpreting the cupbearer's dream was the key to Joseph's promotion. That was a divine appointment. And because of the position he was placed in later as second in command, Joseph was then able to save many lives during the famine, even his brothers who betrayed him. So the betrayal by his brothers ended up becoming a blessing. A moment that seemed tragic and unfair was a divine setup. In Genesis chapter 50, verse 20, Joseph said, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good." Joseph recognized the divine appointment in his life. He saw God's hand in the pain. He may not have recognized it from the beginning, but we can determine from this verse that he figured out that all he had been through was not just random. It was a purposeful orchestration of moments for a greater mission. So this whole set of events from beginning to end didn't take place in a short amount of time, though. For us to read, it's 5 chapters. But there was a lot of time in between there. It's only 5 chapters from the pit to the palace for us to read. But there was a lot of waiting for Joseph. So we know that, Genesis 37 says that Joseph was 17 when he was sold into slavery. And then Genesis 41 tells us that he was 30 when he began serving in Pharaoh's court. So that's 13 years of delay. He wasn't in prison that whole entire time. But I'm sure there were lots of times when Joseph thought, all right, God, what's the plan here? I'm getting a little impatient. Would anyone here describe themselves as patient? Not one person? I don't know if I could be as patient as Joseph. I feel like I am patient to a certain degree. My job requires that of me because anytime you deal with the public, you have to have a little patience, and truthfully, you have to have a lot of patience. And that's maybe why I don't have as much at home, because it all gets spent at work. Sorry, honey. All right. The worry and the waiting can be overwhelming, but God uses all things. Divine delays may not feel too divine in the moment. I've definitely been there. Does not feel divine. But looking back, we can often see that they are God's perfect plan in motion. Joseph's enslavement and rise to power was orchestrated by God to preserve his family and then through them to bless all the families on earth. But divine appointments are not just stories that we read about in the Bible. They are still happening. In my opinion, they are happening all the time. We might not even realize it. I feel like, the places we end up and the people that we meet, sometimes it may be coincidence. A lot of times I don't think it is. And if we allow God to use us, the opportunities for those divine appointments are endless. And so you may think, well, why does it matter? Why does God need me to fulfill his purpose? He's supreme. He doesn't need me. Well, it matters because we have a job. We have a spiritual job. We were not created just to exist. We were saved when we are saved. We're not just saved from, we are saved for. So we are saved for a purpose, and that is to live our lives in a way that serves people and honors God. Honors God, serves people. Let's do that. Yeah, honor God first and serve people. So if you've ever been used by the Lord in any way, whether it be in a formal position as teaching or preaching or just maybe if the Lord tells you to do something and go tell somebody something. If you've ever been used in any way, you realize quickly that what you're doing is not just about the person that you're helping or ministering to. A lot of times it's also for us. I have found that. This made me think back to when I used to teach Sunday school. I taught for many, many years when my son was young, and it was upper elementary, I think 3rd through 5th grade, and I taught them for years. But I always thought, I think I'm getting way more out of this sometimes than the kids, because when you're studying and you're teaching, you pick up even little things, and it was so beneficial for me. Um, and everything we do, in every place we go physically, we need to be taking territory. We can't just think about just being there. Oh, I have to be here and I'll have to be there. So if we view our jobs, now I'm talking about our actual physical jobs now, or if you don't work, your trips to the store, or visiting your family or friends, your doctor's appointments, your dentist appointments, wherever you go, we need to view that as an assignment. But boy, does that take trust. Especially if you're an introvert like me, because I truly am an introvert. I've come out of that a little bit. My job has helped me with that, because I never, in my wildest dreams when I was young, I was painfully shy, never thought I would ever do a job, first off, where I'd have to talk to so many people per day. And then, of course, now I speak to the women, and here I am today. So, but it takes trust. We need to pray to be fruitful wherever we are. Just like Pastor Brian talked about on Sunday, we need to have the fruit, not just the leaves. Do you think if God had revealed to Joseph his purpose on earth, do you think he would have did it? He might have told God, nah, I don't want to do that. I'm comfortable right here. Let me stay in my father's house. Right. It would be so nice. I mean, there's so many times, and I think, God, if you could just tell me the end of this. But I've viewed life as like it's a big puzzle. And slowly and surely, those pieces start coming together. So if God had revealed that to Joseph, I'm like Betty. I don't think he would have done it. And God didn't reveal it, because he's God and he knows what he's doing. He took him through one season after another. And I told you before, I'm a planner. I like to have my days and weeks planned out. I come home from one vacation. Literally, we got back from Wyoming into June. My son and I were in the airport heading back, talking about where are we going next. Because I just like to have something on the horizon. I like to have things planned. But as much as I'd like to know all that my future holds, God knows what I need and when I need it. So if he revealed everything to us, we might choose to change certain circumstances. I probably would. But we're going to miss out on what God has for us. Now, I would not choose a lot of the things that I've had to go through, and I'm sure you probably wouldn't either. But God still uses it. He shapes us and uses our talents, desires, and actually even our failures for opportunities for spiritual growth, ministry, and to share the gospel with others. This is question number 4. Sometimes we can be the recipient of a divine appointment, and sometimes we are the delivery person. Sometimes we can be the recipient of a divine appointment, and sometimes we are the delivery person. We just need to make sure we are ready and willing to be used by God for whatever his greater purpose is in our lives and in the lives of others. So there's a few ways we can be prepared for divine appointments, because we want to be ready, right? The first step is to recognize. That is a question, number 5. The first step is to recognize. We should pray for awareness and sensitivity to God's leading. Ask God for discernment and to open our eyes for opportunities. We should be attentive to the promptings of the Holy Spirit, which can guide us to definitely unexpected encounters or conversations. We have to be vulnerable, and that still is really hard for me. It always seems like when the Holy Spirit, when he nudges us, it's like, why do we question that? Anybody else do that? Yeah. We should also reflect on past experiences when God's guiding was evident. That's what always helps me. I think, okay, God, you've done this before, you're going to do it again. Divine opportunities are more likely to present themselves when we are focused on serving others. The second step is question number 6. The second step to be prepared for divine appointments is to respond. We need to respond. We need to know how to respond. We need to be obedient, step out in faith, even when that path is unclear. Proverbs 3:5, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. Yes, Lord, because I don't know what you're doing, is what I think when I don't know what I'm doing. Trust in you for what you're doing. We should stay ready to serve. Maintain a posture of readiness. Jesus says in Matthew 28:19 and 20, therefore go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you. Now this is the Great Commission. And being ready to serve means keeping our hearts sensitive to the needs of others and living with a mindset that everyday life, everything we do, is our mission field, everywhere we go. Prayer and reflection helps us to remain connected to His will and to be prepared for His divine appointments. And we should ask God to show us the places where we are divinely appointed. So let's view these appointments as opportunities to participate in God's work and witness His power and love. So for me, and I started this well before I even thought about writing this, but I've started viewing my daily appointments with clients as divine appointments. Because every person that sits in my chair is an opportunity to serve and be used. And I am up close and personal with these clients. I have my hands on them. And many, many times, and a lot of them would never know it. Some of them might not even like it, but I have prayed for them while I'm doing their hair. So even if they may not even know it, you can be speaking life over them. So we need to do that wherever we go. Wherever you go, at your job, your family, at the mall, grocery store. Divine appointments align us with our calling. This is question 7. Divine appointments align us with our calling, connect us with the right people, and position us to fulfill God's purpose in our lives and in the lives of others, just like Joseph did. Does anybody need me to repeat that? Divine appointments align us with our calling, connect us with the right people, and position us to fulfill God's purpose in our lives and in the lives of others, just like Joseph did. Joseph recognized and he responded to the appointment that God gave him. So there is a framework of questions that's widely used. Has anybody ever heard of the 5 W's, the who, what, when, where, why, and sometimes you add the how? We use that a lot in school for like problem solving and gaining and understanding of a situation. So tonight I'm going to use it in reference to divine appointments. Who? God. What? Divine appointments. When? Whenever He determines. Where? Wherever He determines. Why? For His purpose. How? By His ways, not ours. So it's that simple. Every one of those W questions, the answer is always God. We don't have to have all the answers because God is always the answer. We just need to trust Him and let Him use us. Sure. Who is God? What is divine appointments? When is whenever He determines. Where is wherever He determines. Why is for His purpose. And how is by His ways, not ours. The story of Joseph teaches us that divine appointments can come through delays, detours, and difficulties. But through all of that, God is weaving together a bigger plan behind the scenes. He can turn pain into purpose, trials into testimonies, and division into unity. And I don't know about you, but I've had some people show up at just the right time for me and give me help and words of encouragement. Has anybody else ever had that happen? So, just for an example, this is my wallet. I've had many wallets because I kind of like purses, but I have a little piece of paper in my wallet for 6 years now. So back in 2019, my family was going through a rough time. Big decisions were having to be made. And right before church one Sunday morning, Fiona tore off a piece of a notebook paper, and she gave it to me, and you're going to make me cry. And she wrote on it, "What the enemy meant for evil, God meant for good." Genesis 50:20. I don't know if that's something that she did a lot of, but I really appreciated it, because not just during that time, but later times, we never know what one small thing will do for somebody. When we obey God's voice and follow what He places on our hearts, it can shift someone's outlook and direction. And I pray that we will all, my nose is running, recognize and respond to the opportunities that God places before us. So I have taken this in and out of a lot of wallets, but I have kept it with me because we need those reminders. So now, when I finish, which is here in just a second, I made it, how many minutes? All right. I did better than I thought. I am going to open up the floor because I know there are some people that have some experiences with divine appointments, and I'd love to hear that. We got plenty of time. But I'm going to end with a quote that I wrote in my notes when I was writing this lesson. And it is, "A divine delay is not necessarily a divine denial. It's merely a divine detour that will divinely deliver you in the divine direction of your divine appointment." All right. Yes, it's hard, but I will. A divine delay is not necessarily a divine denial. It's merely a divine detour that will divinely deliver you in the divine direction of your divine appointment.